Hey, friends. So, I spent the entire day doing the taxes for myself and my wife for the household. When I say the entire day, I mean the entire day from 8:30 a.m. when my wife and daughter left for school until 5:15 when they came back. I didn't move from this very seat in which you see me now. So, it's been a long day, lots of staring at screens, and I oddly for that for how I might imagine my state would be after all that, I did manage to do every bit of our tax work in one single day, which I don't know if I've ever even done that before. But be that as it may, where my mind went, there's something really interesting about doing kind of, I don't want to call it menial work. It's not menial, it's just monotonous, highly detailed work. And what happens to me when I do that is, well, it's a couple things. One, I find myself getting creative in spite of myself. So in other words, like I'll start doing a spreadsheet and then I'll think, so it just looked better if it had a tight green border around it. So I put a little tight green border around it. And then I'm like, that's I can read that, but it's not, I really want these numbers to jump out. So I start highlighting stuff and bolding stuff and putting spaces. And before I know it, I've got this like spreadsheet that I'm like artistically attached to. And it's hilarious. I try not to let myself spend too much time on that. But there's this like creative outpouring that happens in spite of the fact, in spite of the work, rather than sort of as a part of the work. I mean, it is kind of part of the work, but it's almost like my little act of rebellion is that I'm going to make everything beautiful, even though I'm just plugging numbers into a spreadsheet and I have to do it again. And today I made that horrible error of somehow, I swear to high heaven that I was saving, but my computer had not saved it, so I deleted about 90 minutes worth of work. Took me a minute to get over that. So that's kind of one thing that happens is creativity bubbles up, uh, regardless. But the other thing that has happened is that I found myself just with time. There's something about minutia and really nitpicky, nitty gritty, hyper detail oriented work that's almost like a mantra for the mind, in the sense that the part of the mind that does that work kind of starts getting hypnotized by the work, and then there are other parts of the mind that are still free to do their thing. And not only that, but the nitty gritty, nitpicky part of the mind that often tries to get in the way of the more kind of expansively conscious, present, witnessing aspect of the mind, that nitty gritty part is occupied. It's like over there doing something. So it can't, and it's having the time of its life because it loves nothing more than a bunch of details and a bunch of problems to solve. So it's doing that thing, and then this other part of the mind can actually have some space. And in that space today, I found myself thinking about, I watched a Sadhguru video this morning, and I don't know if anybody else is keeping up with Sadhguru, but Sadhguru had a I don't know if it was like a cerebral hemorrhage or something. He had a bunch of blood in his brain, in his skull, and he had to have a literally brain surgery. They had to cut his head open, and release the pressure on the brain. And big deal. This is all in the last, I think maybe 3 weeks ago. This happened 2, 3 weeks ago. I've been keeping loosely tabs on it, but of course now there's videos everywhere about this. And it was really interesting hearing him speak about it. He did a video, or I don't know if somebody else edited it or what, but it was a bunch of a bunch of his insights about the nature of death, in which he talked about all kinds of aspects. I've mentioned many times on my post that he emphasizes the need to be consistently connected to a sense of mortality. Because if we're not connected to a sense of mortality, we will lose the pressure, the longing to transcend mortality. The fear of death, which of course is the thing that the survival part of our brain and part of our cognition wants to banish at all costs and outrun forever, that fear of death actually, especially when it becomes no longer a fear of death, but simply an acknowledgement of death, a kind of cold, clean understanding, and dare I say, an embrace of the fact of death. That same fact can spur us to transcendence. It can move us. And watching Sadhguru go through this process, and then listening to what he says about it, one of the things he says is the physical presence of the guru can actually be sort of a hindrance if we think that the guru is where our capacity for transcendence is located. There's a way in which a great guru, their function is to draw us into a state of transcendence, to bring us into their state. I think that's my understanding of what they mean by transmission. A guru transmits a state. They might be saying words, and there might be information in the words, but they're also operating on a whole other level, where they're simply transmitting a state. And that state is by far the more significant aspect of what they're communicating, because they're literally drawing us into their own state of consciousness, and it brings us along. And that can be a very compelling, incredibly liberating feeling. But if we locate our own sense of that state in the guru, in other words, if we need them to get us there, then the physical presence of the guru has become a hindrance. And I think Sadhguru was taking this opportunity to remind people, I'm not going to be around forever. I'm going to go. Not today. He recovered from his brain injury like that. But it was just a reminder that, like, this will end. And I found that a really beautiful statement, and a really, a very powerful transmission. And then I happened to be listening to, just now, as I was doing the dishes, I was listening to John Vervaeke. I think his name is John Vervaeke. He's got a series called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. It's remarkable. I'm only on episode 8, and there are like over 50 of these things. Really, really spectacular. If you haven't checked out John Vervaeke, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, do so. But he was talking about various needs, various psychological needs, and he talked about having needs. And I'm going to totally just over generalize and sort of like very roughshod over what he over a very some very elegant description that he gave. But basically, having needs are needs to have things. We need to have stuff. We need to use our intellect to understand what things are, so that we can have the things we need. We need to have food. We need to have shelter. We need to have water. We need to have the basic sort of like fundamental, building blocks of life. But then he distinguishes those from being needs, and being needs are needs that are not defined by having things and cannot be satisfied by having things. They're needs to be something. There needs to become something. We need to become virtuous. We need to become loving. We need to become mature. They involve transformation. Being needs inherently involve transformation, ongoing transformation. And first of all, just his description of those two things really, really stuck with me. And then he went on to kind of describe how part of the meaning crisis that this entire 50 plus hour series is all about has to do with living in a culture that encourages us to satisfy our being needs in the having mode. And so if we can be convinced through advertising or any other way that by having something we will become what we want to become, well, now I can sell you stuff. Now I can manipulate your economic behavior because you've located the deepest your own like sense of meaning and transformation over here in a commodity that I can provide. And I've talked about this phenomenon any number of different ways with the attention economy, and I mean there's a lot of really interesting and I think really great analysis of this predicament being done right now. But Vervaeke's description of this and you got to watch it. I mean, it's in episode 7, but you should really start from the beginning and watch them all. His description and how he ties this into some of the greatest thinkers of all time and builds right up to some contemporary thinkers and shows the lineage and how all these different sort of understandings of how the mind works, how human beings work, how that came to being. It's fascinating to listen to. And it indicates something. It reveals something, because somewhere in the middle of all this, he talked about if we know. Well, no, sorry. This is now I'm going back to. I'm kind of like the Sadhguru video that I saw this morning and John Vervaeke's video are kind of blending for me, because Vervaeke talks about if we are not aware of our mortality, then we are more likely to be willing to confuse our being needs with our having needs. We're less likely to feel the inclination, the need to transcend, to transform, which is what all of the being needs involve. Sadhguru said this morning in the video that I watched something about, if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, you would immediately drop all anger. You would immediately drop all anxiety, frustration. Not if you were afraid of dying tomorrow, but if you literally knew it were going to happen. and had accepted it as an inevitability. This presumes we're not still going to war with the idea and trying desperately to prevent it from happening. If we knew we were going to die tomorrow, we would let go of all that shit. And instantly, the only things perhaps, that retain any meaning are our capacity to transform, our capacity to transcend. And so this is kind of what my mind did in the background of me doing our taxes. And it kind of all came out after. As soon as I sent the email to our CPA, I was like, then something about it was like, this is what I've actually been doing today. It's remarkable, the kind of synergy and the sort of connection between a 10-minute video I watched this morning of Sadhguru and a little bit of John Vervaeke this afternoon, and just where my mind is right now about meaning and transcendence and what life is actually about. Because I notice it myself. If I can be really clear, time is limited, time is ticking, this is what I'm doing with my time, I'm using it right now in this way, and it's running out. I'm not trying to be dire or morbid, but this is how I am spending some of my time, actually being conscious of that puts me in a whole other place, puts me in a completely other level of presence. So apparently there's a part of us that can do this even while we're filling out tax deduction forms. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. Please let me know if this resonates with you, speaks to you in any way, if you have analogous insights or realizations in this area. And check out John Vervaeke, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Really awesome. Have a good day. See you soon.